demographer who the City of Oceanside has contracted for this particular issue. She's been leading us and guiding us through this project along with Jamie, and they're going to continue to do so this evening. Just to give you an overview, this is a process that was initiated back on May 3rd, and the city is moving at a rapid pace to get these districts drawn. So this is our 4th out of 5 community meetings. Our first 2 meetings, we received input from the public, getting an understanding of what the various communities of interest were. Then at our last meeting, this previous Saturday, we actually took that input and the demographer began to draft some various maps. So you'll see the maps that we handed out when you first came in. Those are just drafts, but we're going to use that later on as our basis for kind of whittling it down to a couple of districts tonight. So with that being said, everyone here is going to have the opportunity to speak. You can turn in this green form if you wish to speak, and when we're doing the maps, I'll go over kind of the protocol for how we're going to run that later on. Without further ado, I'm going to bring forward Karen McDonald, and thank you for being here.
Yay, Zach. Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. This is the famous PowerPoint that some of you have seen many times by now, and some others have not seen it all that much. I'm not in the way, am I? Is there going to be feedback? No, okay. I'll just stand right here. So I'm going to try to go through this PowerPoint a little faster than I usually do. And if anybody has not seen this and I'm losing you, raise your hand, please, and then I'll just back it up. There's also going to be a little bit of a break after the PowerPoint, and if you just want to ask me some questions, we'll also talk to my colleague, Jamie Clark, who's right over there. That is also a possibility. So we're here to explain everything and to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So I'm going to do this pretty quickly. Let's go, Jamie. Okay, what is districting? We're here because we're going through a districting process. Currently, the City of Oceanside has an at-large election system, which means that everybody gets the same ballot. So on that ballot are all of the candidates that are running for election. We're going through this process to draw districts, individual election districts. There's going to be 4 of them because you currently have 4 sitting council members. We've had some questions about whether it would be possible to draw more districts, and we're suggesting that if that is something that you're interested in, that basically you just see what happens in this process and then take that up later as a policy item with the City Council. So that's not going to be discussed in this particular process. Here and now we're just interested in drawing 4 districts. Next, please. So how does the process work? Thank you for coming to this community meeting. This is our 4th community meeting. We'll have another one next week on Tuesday. The first couple were strictly to get some public input and just kind of talk about where your communities are and try to get everybody involved. And then we went to the City Council, gave them some feedback about what we've been hearing in the community. And then we went back out. We had another meeting last Saturday. And then again, this is the 4th meeting. Last Saturday, for the first time, we started putting some of the public testimony together and tried to draw some districts. You may have seen these concept maps that were on the website, and they're also here in handouts. So these are not districts that we're going to take to the City Council. These are basically just some ideas that came from public input. People, had some ideas about, for example, how many districts a shoreline should be in and whatnot else, and we just tried to conceptualize that and figure out what it would look like and what it would do to all of our other criteria. Jamie will walk you through this later. I think, we'll tell you a little bit more about this later, but we looked at these maps after the meeting more closely, and we looked at the other testimony, and we pretty much have a good sense of which ones of these concept maps are just not going to work straight out the door. They would just be way too much work to turn into something that will actually be legally defensible. There's a couple that may work, that could be turned into something that could work, but then there's also other ways to approach this particular drawing exercise, and I think we're going to try to do that later, basically just try to take all of the public input and see what we can come up with, and is there another map perhaps out there, a different approach. But again, we're doing all of this in public, and you're going to see the results of that, and we're really glad that you're here to participate and give us your input. So again, next Tuesday, we will have another meeting. At that meeting, we're hopefully going to get to one map. So we'll work really hard to get one map that we can then show the city council and then get their feedback, and that will happen on June, we'll release it on June 14, the latest, but on the June 21st meeting, that is a hearing at the City Council, they're going to see this draft map that comes, from this meeting, and they'll be able to give some guidance, some direction, some feedback, and this is also another opportunity for everybody here and everybody who may be interested in giving some feedback to come out and basically just let them know what you think about this whole thing. And then finally on July 25th, so you'll have a month break, on July 25th there will be a reading of the ordinance at a special City Council hearing, and then on August 1st, if all goes well, there will be a vote on this particular map that comes out of this meeting on the 21st. When and where are the meetings? Well, the first 3 have already happened. We're at Lake Elementary today, and then next Tuesday we're at the library community rooms downtown. And the City Council hearings, they're all in City Hall. If you don't have these dates written down yet, they're on the website, and I will give you the web address in a little while. What are our mapping criteria? So these are basically our marching orders. Every districting has marching orders, as I always call them, and the mapping criteria are very, very similar. It doesn't matter where you look, you're going to find these particular districting criteria or redistricting criteria. The first one is equal population, then we have compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act, contiguity, compactness, respect for communities of interest, and then finally we're supposed to disregard incumbents, candidates, and political parties. The first 2 criteria, equal population and the Federal Voting Rights Act, I'll go through these in a little bit more detail. The equal population criterion comes from the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause. It's interpreted to require reasonably equal district populations, and you may have heard one person, one vote. That is essentially what this is talking about. It also prohibits intentional discrimination, because that is a violation of equal protection, because the jurisdiction is treating residents differently because of race and thus not according them equal protection under the law. We also have the 15th Amendment that bans racial discrimination in voting. So you see that basically equal population and the Federal Voting Rights Act, they're already intertwined right here when you're looking at the Constitution. So when we're talking about equalizing the populations, what are we talking about? We're talking about taking the jurisdiction, which of course in this case is Oceanside. We look at the last census count, and of course that is now 7 years old, and we know that that is really long ago, and we know that these numbers are not perfect, but in this country there's only one count every 10 years, and that is the only time that everybody who can be found is actually counted. Everything else is an estimate. So say Department of Finance or all of these nice little statistics that come out of the Census Department, these are actually not counts. And the courts have told us that we absolutely have to use a count. The Supreme Court doesn't like, when it comes to stuff like this, they don't like estimates at all. They don't like statistics at all. They just want people to be counted. And that is what we're going to have to use. Now, on the right side, even though we know that these districts are not going to be as perfect as they might be, in terms of the population numbers that are actually in there, in 4 years you get to do it again. So if these districts don't come out the way that you really like them, or we get the new census data and we find that some of the districts are really just much larger in terms of population than others, then you get to fix that very soon. And really 4 years is going to be here quicker than you think. I mean, I do this redistricting stuff, and I tell you, I can't even believe we're in the year ending with 7. My head is still spinning from the last redistricting in 2011. Anyway, so how do we get the total population? We take our jurisdictions population as reported by the census in 2010, and then we divide it by the number of districts. And that is how you do that anywhere. So, for state of California, if you want to know what the ideal population, as we call this, for the state of California for a Senate district is, we have 40 Senate districts. You take the total population, you divide it by 40, and that is your ideal population. So you don't need a fancy consultant for that kind of stuff. So for us, this will be 41,835 people. So that's what we want in each district. how equal is equal? Do you have to be really, really strict? Do you really have to be exactly at that number, or do you have a little bit of wiggle room? And the good news is that you do have wiggle room. Generally, we can go up to plus minus 5% from that ideal population, which in this case is 2,092 people approximately. And that really gives you really much needed leeway sometimes to, for example, keep a neighborhood together, keep a community together, or just kind of not split some area that you just want to keep together. So this is a really good thing. To have a little bit of wiggle room. If you draw congressional districts, you don't have that leeway. And I don't know if anybody's ever watched when congressional districts are drawn. It is so terrible because you kind of see these beautiful districts and then all of a sudden they just kind of have a few areas just tagged on, and you go, how did this happen? And it happens because of this equal population criterion and because the courts don't like it when congressional districts are in any way off the ideal population. So 1, 2, 3 people maybe, but not more than that. And these are of course really big districts because we have 53 for the entire state of California. So this is a good thing for the local level. Next, please. So the Voting Rights Act, I'll do this pretty quickly. It prohibits the denial or abridgment of voting rights on the basis of race and language minority status. Language minority status is people that are of Asian, Native American, Alaskan Native, or Spanish heritage, and it does not apply to any other language groups. It prohibits practices that have the purpose or effect of discriminating on the basis of race or language minority status, and applies nationwide to all jurisdictions that conduct elections. Excuse me. So basically, this is basically the section of the Voting Rights Act that is still in effect, and it's in effect everywhere. So nobody needs to feel like they're being picked on. This applies everywhere. It doesn't matter if you have a tiny little water district or if you are the county of Los Angeles. This is something that applies to everybody. This is the law, and you have to just act accordingly. There's a couple of major ways in which there is what we call vote dilution when it comes to the Federal Voting Rights Act. And the explanation of that is electoral systems can limit the ability to elect a candidate of choice by a protected class of voters. So the protected class is the racial categories plus the language minorities. In various ways. For example, in at-large election systems, they can make it impossible for even a large minority group to elect a candidate of choice when the majority votes against them. And that really makes intuitive sense. If you are a tiny minority group, let's just say you're 20% in this area, if everybody else doesn't vote the same way that you do, then of course you're going to be outvoted every single time, and you're not going to be able to elect somebody. So if you, however, have a district and the 20% are in the district, and say you have 5 districts or so, then of course you're a lot more powerful in that district. And that is sometimes why districtings are happening. But single-member districts, which is what we're drawing here, can also be drawn in ways that minimize voters' ability to elect a candidate of choice. And that is basically when you take that group of minority members and you slice and dice it into different districts so that they can still not elect somebody of choice. These are the sneaky things that you read about, and that is basically when people are talking about gerrymandering. They usually talk about something like this. Systems that limit this ability to elect in that way are said to dilute minority voting strength. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and districting, this is already something that I basically just described. There are 2 different methods of vote dilution under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act that have been in the courts very frequently. And basically one is cracking, and that is again when you divide up a politically viable population concentration so it still isn't a majority in the district. Or packing, you just put everybody into one district. So let's say you have a minority group that is large enough to be a majority in 2 districts, but you put them all into one district, then that is also not permitted under the law. Race and redistricting, really quickly, we've talked about race and language minority status a lot, but then the courts, tried to make it a little bit more interesting for us, and they said race cannot be a predominant criterion in line drawing. And it was just a case that just came down a couple of days ago that everybody's debating right now, and that seems to tighten this thing down a little bit more even. What the courts have been saying is that race should not subjugate traditional districting principles, i.e. you cannot just use race and just say, okay, I'm just going to draw a whole bunch of Latino districts or Asian districts or black districts, and you just do not get to do that. You have to weigh all of your redistricting criteria, and the best way to do that is look at traditional districting criteria, such as the ones that we have in our marching orders, which are compactness, contiguity, and communities of interest. And that's what we're going to be talking about now. So what's compactness? Compactness addresses the geography of the district, and there's lots of different ways to measure it, so there are some statistical formulas that you can use, but most of the time, really, people are looking at it and going, okay, well, that really doesn't look good. And if it doesn't look good, that's usually where you get these, like, fingers reaching out, things just kind of have really funny shapes, and sometimes there is nothing wrong with these funny shapes, because sometimes it's just your city boundary. And you guys have a really funny city boundary, actually, What did you call it? The lake that kicks Carlsbad, right? You have that lake sticking out here. I mean, if you didn't tell somebody what this is, if you just told somebody, well, this is my district, and that person would say, well, that's obviously a gerrymander, because look at that thing you have sticking out there, But that's actually your city boundary, and clearly you're not going to do anything about that. So everybody has to be assigned to a district. But oftentimes when it looks funny, there's actually a reason for it looking funny, and it could be investigated. So why is compactness important? Because the courts have said it is assumed to guard against all types of gerrymandering. Drastic departures from compactness are a signal that something may be amiss, so they're going to look at it a little closer. Contiguity, next criterion. This is basically, again, a geographic criterion, and it's really straightforward. A contiguous district is just one in which you can travel from one end of the district to the other end of the district without leaving the district. So you cannot have a district that has part of it in one part of your city, lots of stuff in between, and then the other part on the other end of the district. That just doesn't work. It has to be connected. Next, please. And then finally, communities of interest. Council districts shall respect communities of interest as much as practicable. Communities of interest generally refers to a contiguous population, so again, contiguous in one piece, which shares common social and economic interests. The interesting thing here is that this is a criterion that has been around forever. It's a traditional redistricting criterion and districting criterion, but there's really no data sets out there that you can use. So this is what we're doing here, is we're building a data set basically from scratch by people telling us about their communities and about what's going on here in Oceanside. What do you need representation on? Who would best be in a district with whom, and essentially just telling us about the geography also. Who defines a community of interest? You are the experts, because you all live here. So it's not something that we would do for you. We need to hear from you to be able to implement this. And that's basically what we're starting to do, and actually have been doing. The law does not limit the kinds of interests that bind a community, so it's not just that it has to be 1, 2, or 3 different things. It basically is just up to you, because you know what's going on the ground. It depends on how you're organized and what you're organized around. It's up to those who live or work with communities to identify and establish the interests that unite it. And the interests don't have to be limited to the current situation. It could also be a common goal. Next, please. The 2 big categories that we usually hear in California in terms of districting or redistricting are economic interests and social interests. Here are a couple of examples. For example, current situation could be, we organize because we all have the same employer. Let's say somebody works at the harbor and everybody who lives there also works at the harbor, and you're organizing around it because, for example, there is more business coming in, and maybe there are environmental concerns and so forth. So it could be that, economic opportunities, or maybe a lack of economic opportunities. And the goals could be you are working on expanding those opportunities. It could be development, bringing in businesses and jobs. And then social interests usually are the main topics that we hear in listening to people talk about their communities. Is we hear a lot about schools, like how people organize around schools. Maybe a school is a focus point for a particular community to hold meetings. All of the kids in a particular neighborhood go to this school, so there's a lot going on maybe with the school playgrounds and so forth. Culture. People organize around their culture. There's cultural centers. This may be, a shared culture. People come from the same place in the world and they're gathered in a particular area. Transportation hubs and parks are also oftentimes communities of interest. And goals could be improving the recreational opportunities or public safety, preserving historic resources if there is, say, a historic area or just historic buildings that are being preserved, or maybe a district that pops up around that. So that is all permissible. The courts have not limited this at all, this particular area. In order to document a community of interest, it's pretty straightforward. So basically just think about, what are you organized around? What bonds your community? Outline what defines your communities of interest. What's your mission? What's your commonality? Sometimes it helps to think about what's different outside of your community, just to help you think about, who you really are. And where's your community located in the city? For that, if you could give us a map, maybe create a map of the boundaries. If you like to go online, there are some instructions online on how to draw a map using Google Earth. And so we have a whole bunch of stuff on the website actually that will help you. You can also just draw one on a piece of paper or just give us the outlines, just write them down. And then finally, please ignore politics. Disregard the location of incumbents. So we don't want to know where anybody lives. If you know somebody who wants to run for office, please just don't share that. Don't share where their locations are, because we're trying to draw some good districts here, and the districts, maybe they outlive the political ambitions of some new candidates or so. This basically just prohibits it basically prevents intentional harm or benefit. So why should you participate? You already know that because you're here, but if you need some talking points to get some other people involved, to make sure that we know about your community of interest, of course, to give your community a voice and make sure it has equal access to the political process, to encourage citizens to register and vote and remain politically engaged, and to help shape a districting plan that provides communities a meaningful opportunity to elect candidates who represent their interests on issues that are important to their lives. How do you get involved? This is, basically come here, talk to us. Thank you for being here. Fill out one of our forms to let us know where your community of interest is, or give us any kind of feedback. You can come up and tell us in this meeting what we're missing or what we don't know. You can send us emails at districtelections@ci.oceanside.ca.us, and you can get information online. If you go to the city's website, the first link is districting, and there is a whole list of documents that you can print out. Many of them, I think all of them are translated also if you need a Spanish copy. And there's also a little community mapping program on there. And it's a pretty good website, so if I say so myself. So thank you very much for participating. Thanks for being here. This concludes this presentation. We're going to take a quick break, maybe 10 minutes, look at some maps, look at your handouts, ask us some questions. Work with Jamie if you'd like to, and if you want to know like how many people are in a particular area of town, or just want to look at some maps, talk to each other, figure out how this should work, look at some of these handouts that you have with the maps on and say, this one doesn't work at all, or this one may work, and then we'll get back together and we'll take your input, and then Jamie's going to start drawing some maps. So we'll work on some of the maps that we have already created in the last meeting. Again, we're trying to pare things down a little bit, go down to 2 or maybe even 1 map today. I know that there is one more map, and at the very least that we want to explore, because we realized that we hadn't really done that. So we're going to do that today live, and then Jamie's going to take over after the break. So thank you very much for coming.
Folks, there's also cookies and water outside. If you could just consume your cookies outside, that would be great. Water's okay in here.
On all of your input on all of these different items. So as we're coming up to this next stage of the meeting, what's really important is we're going to have basically one quick portion and then the elongated portion. The first one is we have a couple of speakers who turned in green forms who wish to speak specifically about communities of interest. So you're just going to have the chance to speak for a few minutes specifically about communities of interest, and then we're going to shift over, and then Jamie is going to begin with the map process. And at that time, just to let you know how it's going to work, Jamie will begin drawing a map, drawing those districts. During that process, if there are any disputes about how it's going, we could always take a vote. If you say we want to draw the line north and go south, you can just raise your hand and then we can take a vote, and the vote will determine if Jamie does that. I don't think we're going to have to do that, but if we do, just want to let you know that's the formal process. Secondarily, after she draws the first map, then what we'll do is each person will have the opportunity to speak for a minute here at this microphone. You just come up and line up and then speak specifically to that map. So I'll go over this again later on. I just want to let you know that when the map drawing begins, those who were at the meeting on Saturday, it gets a little lively, and everyone wants to kind of speak, which is great. That's why you're here, and that's really important. But the most important thing is that we want everyone to have an equal opportunity to speak, so that way everyone has the opportunity to voice their opinions, and that way we're reflecting most accurately how the city wants this done, or the community members of the city want this done. With that being said, our first speaker on communities of interest is Terry Johnson, so you can come up and speak.
Thank you, Zach. My name is Terry Johnson, and I am a lifelong resident of this city. My community of interest is the whole city. However, tonight I'm here to submit to staff a proposal that Richard Fox has, and I agree with it except for a few changes. And I just spoke to Jamie about those changes. Unfortunately, she didn't save it because it's a little bit over. But my main concern is the East Side Capistrano, Mid Valley, and North Valley area. The boundaries are roughly to the west, I-5, to the north, the Camp Pendleton border, to the south, 76/Mission Avenue border, and to the north, Vandegrift. As Jamie just shared with me, I'm about 13% over, and as we know, it's a numbers game, and each district today, based on the 2010 census, has to be around 43,000. Now, 3 years from now, we're going to do this whole process all over again. So I just wanted to just very briefly state my concern regarding the area I just spoke on. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate it. Our next speaker is Jamie Figueroa. There you go. And you can use this if you want to point at the map.
Yeah, for sure. Can you show me? Hey, how are you? Yeah. Hi, how's everyone doing today? I apologize for my recreational attire. I literally just came back from chasing my daughter around Legoland all afternoon, so I'm very happy to be here with you guys today. So I'm a lifelong resident of Oceanside, California. I've done a lot of work in the community, primarily working with gang prevention in the Northeast Valley area of Oceanside. I've done a lot of work with Maricosta College, but I've really worked with youth all throughout the city of Oceanside and with a lot of different faith-based organizations. So again, like Mr. Johnson said, my community of interest is all of Oceanside, but today I'm here primarily to talk about two specific communities, one of them being the Valley. And when I think about the Valley, I think about the Mid-Valley and the Deep Valley, and it's kind of hard to show on this map, but it's going to be everything within the Fireside community, which is east of Fusa Avenue and north of Mission Avenue. And so for me, I used to run a gang prevention program called Project Reach, which was located on North River Road in Calle Montecito. A lot of our youth came from both communities, so we always included both communities in our grant funding. When we wrote grants to the state of California, when we wrote grants to different corporations, we always included the Fireside community. One of the reasons why is because we worked with at-risk youth, teenagers. There is not currently after-school programs for youth in the Fireside community for teenagers, so most of them either attend Project Reach Libby Lake, which is located in the Libby Lake community, which is on Calle Montecito, North River Road, or Melba Bishop, which is also in the North Valley area of Oceanside. A lot of the faith-based organizations that work with gang prevention and with youth, we do collaborative efforts in both communities. So for us, it's very important that we keep those communities intact when we start talking about districting. All those students attend either Martin Luther King Middle School or Chavez Middle School, and all those students who are in high school attend El Camino High School. When we change public transportation routes, we always consider both communities. So it's not, we don't ever think about the San Juan Capistrano Mid-Valley as a different community from the Deep Valley, which is located in northeast region of Oceanside. Along with that, there's also the San Luis Rey Mission, which most of us know about who are Oceanside residents. Most of those residents attend the San Luis Rey Mission, so there's a faith base, and also a Family Fellowship Church. Another community that I'm very concerned about that I want to make sure that it's imperative that it stays intact, which is the Tri-City community. The Tri-City community consists of everything going down College Boulevard that runs both east and west of Thunder Drive, both east and west of Marvin, both east and west of Roselle. It includes the Sherborne community as well as the John Landis. So it's important for a Parks and Recs standpoint that we keep both those communities intact and that they are not divided when we start creating the division lines within the district. So for me, I really advocate that for recreational purposes, for gang prevention purposes, for our youth and public transportation, also for faith-based and all the organizations that work together, that we keep the Tri-City community intact, and that we also keep the Mid-Valley and the northeast region of Oceanside, which is the Deep Valley, intact. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Great. Our next speaker is Mary Ellen Reese.
Thanks.
Laser pointer?
No. Okay, I've been here 33 years, irrelevant, but it's probably longer than some of you who've been here for your life. Notice that one word, the words that the speakers are using, we don't want things divided. This is a completely divisive thing to do. It's going to pit, no matter how you chop it up, it's going to pit groups of Oceanside voters against each other. We will be gamed by that. The gerrymandering thing will crop up. You know, it's just, to me, it's so obvious. But What I want to speak about in terms of if we have to do this, a fair way to do it, I like the strata map because economically, everybody should have an economic interest in that coastal area. That's where the tourist money's going to be made, and you don't ever want to be in a situation where people say, hey, the money's made here, it should be spent here. Everybody's got an interest, an economic interest in that coast. So I already heard that perhaps that strata plan won't even be under consideration. I am urging you guys to make your voice heard to say, no, we want it divided that way. And I'm really curious to hear what communities of interest these other plans are supposed to be representing. I haven't heard of divisiveness and communities of interest complaining about not being represented before this solution to what I didn't know was a problem. So I'm just urging people to think of the economic situations that could result if the coast is segmented off.
Our next speaker is Cindy Rocco. Would you like me to hold that for you?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
I'm going to be taking off some as we go along. So. Hi, my name's Cindy Rocco. I live in South Oceanside. And first, I just want to ask in the audience, how many people believe that the coastline is a community of interest or is something that should be looked at carefully? Okay, because it's important to the whole side of the city, is the west side and the east side equally. But initially what I did was I wanted to really focus on the coast as a primary community of interest, as a shared interest. And what I did was manually go in and try to do the numbers, just filled out the whole map on this. If you saw my house, it has more maps of Oceanside with numbers filled in. But anyway, what I did was I just looked at everything from the west of 5. This is the 5, and I cut the line off because it was going to take too long to do all the numbers. And I counted up all of the district, the blocks inside here. So the total population on the west of 5 is 18,272. You're going to see the map by Richard Fox has it divided in 3 sections along the coast. Hang on a second. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. So what it does is, it basically, in my perspective, is it gives one piece sort of a token, because there's only 189 residents at the harbor segment north of the 76. So there really isn't any power in the population or the density there. Given a dividing line, I know a lot of people want a dividing line at Oceanside Boulevard. It's a pretty landmark street, but if we did that, South Oceanside would only have 43 people, and the center segment from the south of 76 to Oceanside Boulevard would be 12,240 people. So I wanted to look at it from a population density perspective, not specifically by cutting these lines. So I got rid of, hold on 1 second. I wanted to give everybody an equal an equal voice. Sorry, no one's getting divorced tonight. And so that would be 9136 people approximately on both halves of the coast. And the whole purpose here is to protect the coast for these 2 quadrants for the rest of the city and do quadrants in the entire city. But you need to have caretakers for our coast, especially with the high development density that's going in and the Coast Highway Vision Plan. I think we need to have a balanced perspective and input and representation. So what I did was do an initial divide instead of Oceanside Boulevard. I brought it up by the Cafe 101 by Wisconsin. And then that would give us, and I got rid of the 189 token. And so that would be 9386 in the North Beach section and 9197 in the South Beach. Now this takes nothing into consideration east of the 5, although I do have input on that as well. But for right now, my focus is going to be the coast. Now, I know that, hang on 1 second, try to be organized. Some of the other things that this does take into consideration, other communities of interest are for the Crown Heights area. It would go Wisconsin up to the Crown Heights area and would gather that population. And what that'll do is allow for this candidate or this council person to pay more personalized attention to that area, which is an underserved population. What happens here, if you do it, everything north of Wisconsin is going to have east side. And again, that council representative is going to give more individualized and focused personal attention on that underserved population, in my beliefs. Also, I know that a big concern is Seaside District and the division of that community of interest. And I know it's a very important community, and there's also OCNA, which is actually Oceanside Coastal Neighborhood Associations. So what this does is actually, this is to look at the benefit of the entire city, and we're changing. And so to have it where you're integrating into that Oceanside coastal neighborhood, you're integrating to North Beach and South Beach into that, and it actually gives more leverage because their concerns are our concerns, basically. And so what it does is give, hang on 1 second. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, so OCNA becomes inclusive for the total coastal, sorry, I'm just going to read my cards. And it does fragment, but it's for the greater good. And also, the key aspect is to create coastal parity, because it's the entire city's safety net for the coast. That's my section on the coast. I do have other things as well, but that's it for now.
Thank you, Cindy. Larry, come on up. Yeah. No problem. There you go.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Larry Cornett. One of the things that I did want to talk about was specifically why this actually may make some sense. And for those of us who live in, let me steal your pointer. I'll give it back this time. For those of us who live in this area, specifically right here, which is Jeffrey's Ranch, this sort of is the precipice for what really kind of happened. We came home one day, our signs were gone for the entrance to our development. The road was closed, surprise. Because we didn't have any specific representation, there was no way to get a hold of anybody. There was a council member, and her name will remain nameless, however, who was able to at least conduct some meetings, so we at least got some voice out, which was kind of important. But we got basically slammed, and everybody said, well, you know, it's just a little equestrian agricultural area. The top map that you have here, at least in my opinion, gives us the best, worst scenario for right now. I think it's fair to say that 167,000 people in Oceanside is underestimated. We're probably at about 210 or 220, and by 2020, when we have to do this again, we're probably going to be looking at 6 areas, or 6 districts, not 4. The other thing is that for me to be here, I don't necessarily think that the beach really makes sense to get any piece of it. If you take a look at the strata, what it does is cut Jeffrey's Ranch, which is a neighborhood, right in half. So that doesn't necessarily work out for us, or we don't think so. Also, the repugnant idea of putting 750 homes in this agricultural area is ridiculous. And so we don't want to be the area where people say, oh, we'll develop there, build there, throw it there, put your garbage there. So we need to be able to protect that. Now, I was talking to somebody who said, these are just voting districts. You need to understand something. They're not just voting districts. They're going to be representative districts. What that means in a good way is you'll actually have, in my opinion, a little more access to who your representative is going to be within the city council. But understand, in my best guess, it's going to be 6, not 4, in the 2020 time period. But I would really urge you to take a look at that first map, which keeps this as one piece. Going here, we have a lot of seniors, so there's a lot of vested interest in here. The beach is getting cut into 2, and it gives everybody the opportunity to do what I think maybe lacks right now, and that's negotiate. Sometimes you have to negotiate in order to get things done. It's not the greatest idea sometimes, but I'd rather have the idea that everybody should have a little bit of industry, a little bit of agriculture, and for those who are concentrated on the beach, which is what you were saying, Cindy, that's really, that you consider it kind of its own community, easier to cut it into 2 than it is to 4. So hopefully that gives you a little more of an idea of what you're looking at as far as those of us who live, as John Coleman used to say, in the boonies. That's our idea of at least the best worst solution. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So,
She's not here yet, but she wanted me to show her.
So this is just specifically to those who are speaking about communities of interest. So yeah, exactly. And then we're going to have a second portion that's going to be specific to the maps that are being drawn. But if you want to speak, by all means, yeah, please do.
And
after.
This is for art, yeah.
Yeah, after.
So my name is Barbara Hazlett. Okay. I guess I could get rid of the mic.
If you want to point anything, I can point out.
Okay. I'm Barbara Hazlett, and this is the first meeting I went to, so when you went to school, you did what you were supposed to do, you wrote it on the sheet, and it sounds like probably the other 3 speakers have been to meetings before this, because they seem to be pretty familiar with the procedure. And I have to agree, I think it was Mary, was that your name? Mary, I agree with her. I do not like the districts. I think we've been running Oceanside very well with the overall elections, and I was one of the people that were there rallying on May 3rd, saying that we should not vote for districts, but it happened. And really what we were we were forced into this by a lawsuit, and they did the same thing to Escondido and Vista, and now they've done it to Carlsbad after us. And the reason why the council voted to district was because they had a letter that was a lawsuit, and they only had 90 days to answer, and they were afraid that if we actually went to fight the lawsuit, we would have to pay $5 million or something like that, and the city can't afford to do that. We're not giving up. Some of us are still trying to fight. But in the meantime, I'm glad that they had these 3 maps, and I think what our last speaker referred to was actually called the neighborhood map, and that's the one I'd like you to look at as well. Our interest also, what I wrote down here, let me put my glasses on. Oh, do you want to take the map? Yeah, okay, you can take the neighborhood map here. Perfect. Okay, describe our common interest. I said we are interested in good education and in the neighborhood, and that map is called the neighborhood. And I said we're part of this little elbow that kind of comes down at the end there, and we want to be a neighborhood. A neighborhood is a place that's has continuity, and as you can see on that map, there is a continuing thing there. And I live in Ocean Hills Country Club, which is 55 and older, and so we certainly like having a Tri-City Hospital nearby, because many of us have to use that. We also have a little golf club in our neighborhood, and also in the same area as El Camino Country Club, and also Mira Costa College. Many of us are interested in the cultural things, in the theater and the music that they have over, and also the learning programs that they have for seniors. And the good thing is, like our other friend said, that was talking about the coastline, on this map, the coast is divided up into two parts. So it's not like the Strata one. I'm sorry, the guy that, or was it you that wanted the Strata one? Whatever. Strata just doesn't look practical. It's not a neighborhood. It would take you forever to get from one end of it to the other. So I think the boundaries should be logical, and the Strata map is not logical. The neighborhood map is logical. I think the north boundary would be Oceanside Boulevard, and one of the other boundaries would be the 78. And I think Melrose and Vista, the Vista boundary line is, I mean, we got to stop at Vista, so that's the part down there. So these are the interests that we have here, and I think it would be a very good neighborhood. I also agree with the person that said districting will pit districts against each other, and that's bad. Some of you will be saying, well, why can't we have 2 country clubs in our district, and why can't we have a hospital in our district? And see, that's just going to create dissension between the districts. In the past, when we had the general elections, the city council looked out for the best part of Oceanside, and they built the business districts where we had room, and they built the hotels downtown where the tourists wanted to go, and they didn't care what district it was in. They just did what was appropriate for the area. And I'm very disappointed that this went through, but I am here because I want to have the best district representing me that I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you so much. There you go. Okay, so now we're going to move forward and hand it over to, okay, if can you just do less than 1 minute, though, if you just show it. Yeah, perfect. Okay.
I just, Arlene Hammerschmidt asked me to represent her because she was at another meeting and she obviously didn't make it here yet. But she wanted to be sure that for her, the communities of interest, being a parent of children that use the district, she wanted to make sure that neighborhoods are generally focused and surrounded by networked by schools. So to her, she wanted, her community of interest is to preserve and recognize the local schools as being important to be together because they generally become a hub within a neighborhood. I know you probably can't see this as well, but it has all the schools outlined and those little communities, the little hubs for where the students go to school. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. Here you go. No, that's great. So now we're going to move on to Jamie, and I'm going to bring the microphone over here. And so just a quick reminder, just kind of general protocol for this process. So Jamie's going to begin with the mapping. During that time, just kind of let her do her thing. And if there are disputes or disagreements, please raise your hand. And at that point in time, we'll let the entire room vote as to what the direction should go in. But more importantly is after she's finished with this map, then you'll have the opportunity to line up at this microphone and speak specifically about the map that she draws. That's going to be the most efficient way for us to do it, but also I want everyone to have the opportunity to speak, and that way everyone has equal opportunity. So if you have any questions, let me know, but for without further ado, here's Jamie Clark.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you to everybody who has commented on the maps. Thank you to everybody who has submitted community of interest testimony. There's quite a bit, and I'm going to share some of it with you right now. And again, yeah, thank you for taking part in this process. So first, I'm just going to go over the community of interest testimony that we've received so far, and I'm going to try and do it pretty quickly and give everybody the general sense of what people have been saying. And you'll see the areas come up on the map on that projected screen up there, and then I can zoom in and zoom out to show more detail about the communities of interest. So one thing that this is Oceana, the neighborhood Oceana, and one thing that we've kind of found in this districting is that people in Oceanside really identify with their neighborhoods, and there's even been community of interest testimony saying keep all of the neighborhoods together as much as possible, and this was a community of interest that was submitted. Again, it's just the Oceana neighborhood. And moving on, this is Fire Mountain. I'm not going to zoom in because just for the sake of time. So that's Fire Mountain and South Oceanside. There, as we've heard today, there's been community of interest testimony that all of the shoreline is one community of interest. This is the community of interest submitted from the Coastal Neighborhood Association. It's just about Mission Ave and the 5, Oceanside Boulevard, and of course to the shoreline. We've received some written testimony that Crown Heights and the East Side neighborhood are one community of interest and should stay together and intact in one district. Also in this same area, have gotten some testimony about this smaller community of interest. This is just about Holly and Bush. This is Loretta up here, and of course the 5. So again, that's a community of interest saying that they would like to stay intact and together in one district. Moving on to the northeastern part of the city, this was a community of interest that was submitted saying this Morrow Hills area and everything, going down the 86 and with Melrose here being the district the community of interest boundary. This is not quite all the way out to Melrose, as you can see here, but this is just including Jeffrey's Ranch and Morrow Hills, please excuse me. And again, that wasn't a full district, that was just a community of interest. Moving more towards the center of the city. This is a community of interest around Douglas and 76. This community of interest was based on a lot of seniors living in this area. And again, a separate community of interest, but also concerning seniors, was saying that there was quite a few seniors living in this area, which is El Camino Real, Mesa, and 76. So that was just a community of interest that was submitted. Somebody who lived in that area saying that area would like to be together in one district. And sometimes communities of interest are submitted saying, and so this right here is Rancho del Oro, and this person who submitted this testimony said that both sides of Rancho del Oro are one community of interest, and because they're working on common goals within that sort of thoroughfare to keep it smaller, to limit the use of semis, et cetera, in that area. So I know it looks a little bit funny, but sometimes the census blocks, which is the smallest unit that we can be mapping on, and that's just areas that are assigned by the census. Unfortunately, they're not always, as you can see, in tidy, perfect squares, and again, it's the smallest unit that we can use to map with, so that just happens to be in an area where some of them are a little bit inconsistent in their shape, and that's just both sides of Rancho del Oro. And another community of interest, this person was saying that it's between Rancho del Oro, Oceanside Boulevard, South El Camino Real, and again, the city limits. And moving on, the Mira Costa neighborhood as a community of interest. And that, I would say that just about sums up the general community of interest testimony.
You didn't mention the part that I had down at the bottom there.
So all of these communities of interest that I have up here are communities that have been submitted already, and I haven't had time to review everybody's today and create the lines for all of them, and so.
The whole line in the neighborhoods, the whole bottom section in the neighborhoods that went across the bottom of your neighborhood map?
Right, so also that was part, yes, I see what you're saying, and we can review all of the other maps that we created with community members. soon in this meeting, and I just haven't had time to digitize every single community of interest. Everything that has been submitted up until about 10 a.m. this morning has had a chance to be digitized, but anything after that, since we have been traveling here today, et cetera, I haven't been able to digitize.
Being told that we're supposed to submit things ahead of time, so we didn't know that.
Yes, so
So
let me...
these are communities of interest that have been submitted at previous meetings or through the email address that Karin mentioned before. And so now I have your community of interest, and then after this meeting, I'll be able to digitize all of the new communities of interest that have been mentioned today. And thank you so much for that question. Okay, so in the last meeting, we drew districts based on community testimony and it was sort of a really good exercise, I think, for people who were there to see what some of the limitations are when you're trying to build these lines. Again, it's based on population. Of course, also we want to take into consideration community of interest testimony. And so I'm going to try right now to draw some maps that one map that takes into consideration community of interest testimony that we've heard so far. I am going to try and do this using major streets. I am going to try not to cut any communities in half. For example, I'm sure somebody could imagine if they lived in Jeffries Ranch, as we heard today, that they wouldn't want some people in Jeffries Ranch to be in one district and some people to be in another district. So trying to use more major lines or, geographic boundaries, for example, in that. When I am building these for people who were not at the last meeting, I'm going to have this sort of like visualization up to help people. This will be a running tab of the population in each of the districts. And remember, we have to stay plus or minus 5%. So that's the percent deviation, which is in this box. I'm sorry, I am unable to change the font size in that box, and I will do my best to be sort of informing people of what the percent deviation is as these are being built. And again, I'm sorry that I can't change that. I know it's pretty small.
And real quick, just one more reminder. So as Jamie begins this process of drawing, during this time, we'll just let her draw, and then we'll save the comments for after she's finished drawing, so that way everyone has a chance to speak. So with that, go for it, Jamie.
All right, thank you. So I'm gonna start, I think, in this area of the city. And I'm just gonna pull up some of I'm going to pull up some of the communities of interest that we've had in this area so far. This is sort of having Loma Alta and Crown Heights, again, this northern area of the harbor, please excuse me. Crown Heights and East Side. All right, I'm just going to give it a start. So you can see here that just in this area that is highlighted right now, there's 457 people. So just to give everybody an idea, when this red part grows, then that's going to be the district area. And I'm also going to put the neighborhood map up so that everybody can also get an idea of where in the city we are when we're doing this stuff. So, and again, I'm just using census block groups. So these are not the absolute smallest, but for the sake of time, because it takes a bunch of time to click all of the millions of blocks in the city, then I'm just going to use the census block group right now. So moving south to town site. And here's Loma Alta that we saw. There was some testimony, pardon me. Saying Loma Alta this area of the coast could be a community of interest. And I'm just going to zoom to get some better detail. So even though this line that was here for the neighborhood maps said that that was the end of Loma Alta, this is Oceanside Boulevard, which we've heard some testimony about being a good boundary for this area. So let's see. And I'm gonna see, so we've heard also testimony that maybe this area along Oceanside Boulevard would be a good dividing line. So I'm gonna see what it looks like if we just grab some of this Oceana area. As we know, that's also a community of interest, and that's negative 1.36% deviation. So I'm gonna save this and move on. Negative 3.16%, yes. Which is within the deviation. And I'm gonna zoom in here just to make sure. All right, so that is not actually quite Oceanside Boulevard, so I'm gonna just, oh, pardon me. Really quickly make that change. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. So this is just one big block. I mentioned that not all the time are the census blocks in nice, tidy little squares. So I'm just going to click this and show you this is like one long census block that takes up a lot of the coast but doesn't have any population in it. So does everybody see how it's just really big and long? All right.
Why do we have to use census?
Sure, please do.
Okay, we have to use census blocks because that is the smallest unit of analysis, so the lowest geography on which the census reports total population. So essentially these are given building blocks that everybody has to use, not just we.
And of course, these are not final, and we will be taking comment on them and looking at the other maps. This is just showing options. All right, and as we know, this one's about 4.88% deviation. We've heard testimony that this is a district configuration that people are happy with or could be happy with, so I'm just gonna leave it as we see. There's the Tri-City area intact, Lake and Ocean Hills intact, and included in this are Mira Costa, Fire Mountain, and South Oceanside. Okay, and then I'm going to try and sort of fill in from this area. This is the Jeffries Ranch and Morrow Hills community of interest. Let's see. All right, and we heard about keeping North Valley intact and in one district earlier today. So, all right, and I'm gonna, so now this area, which is highlighted, is 2.46% deviation, and this one is negative 3.3% deviation. I'm gonna save this and then sort of zoom in to see, because this line looks a little bit funny and like it, I don't know, potentially is splitting up some neighborhoods. So I'm gonna save that and then sort of zoom in and fine tune it. Okay, so looking in here, this is, I'm gonna see if it would be possible to use the river. Does that seem like an appropriate dividing line for that area? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any disagreements on that? Okay. All right.
And I'm also going to pull up some of the, all right, just pulling up some of the communities of interest around there. Thank you. So right now, as I'm going to also zoom into here, this line right here is College. Would it maybe make sense to include in the blue? Thank you.
Would everyone be okay with including that in the blue? Any disagreements? Would you not like that included? Okay. It's that neighborhood right there. Yeah. Yeah, let's, yeah, Jamie, could you zoom out just a little bit to show everyone?
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Just where
So that was on College between the 76 and the river right here. And part of that community was included in the yellow.
Okay, thank you.
District. We heard some testimony about Mission around here being a good. Right.
Thanks again for your patience, everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay. And really quick. There's a Okay, so here's one more configuration of how this could look. Again, this is town site, East Side Capistrano Airport, Oceana, and Loma Alta, all intact and in one district. Right here is Oceanside Boulevard. This district, again, the red one, is negative 4.23% deviation. This green one, which includes South Oceanside, Fire Mountain, Mira Costa, Tri-City, Lake, and Ocean Hills. Again, this is Oceanside Boulevard dividing line, is 4.88% deviation, so within the 5% range. This blue district would be Morrow Hills, Jeffries Ranch area, some of Wahome, and this line is Santa Fe, is the dividing line here between the blue district and the yellow one, moving along 76, up College, down by the river. This is Douglas, which I am happy to explore, seeing if there can be a dividing line here instead of sort of excluding these communities from the yellow district, if Douglas is a good line to use.
Real quick, so
oh, and if there are mobile home parks on both sides of Douglas? Okay.
okay, so real quick, so we want to continue with the map as drawn, not change it to over by Douglas,
And
correct? Okay, all right, no disagreement on that? Okay.
And this blue district then is, let's see, negative 0.45% deviation, so less than 1% deviation. And the yellow district is negative 0.19% deviation. And there's 1 population. So now okay, and it looks like there's 1 0 population block somewhere that isn't assigned to a district, so. Excuse me?
Yeah, we're there.
Oh, there, it was right here. At the very top, okay. Great, thank you, everybody. So if this seems like a good pausing place for this particular configuration, I can save it as a snapshot, and then we could take comment, thank you so much, comment for the other maps that everybody has in front of them as well.
So is everyone?
Nope, that was a 0 population.
Is everyone okay to save this map and then take public comment? Okay, real quick. This is the new neighborhoods.
This is,
We'll have to wait for the public feedback, I think.
yeah, or maybe since there's already one called neighborhoods, maybe we could call this community of interest map or something like that. I don't know.
Any dispute of not wanting to save this? Okay, so Jamie, why don't you save this? And now at this time, so if you want to speak, feel free to line up at this microphone. If you're unable to get up, just let me know and I'll get up. And 2 minutes to speak each. I will be timing you on my phone, so I'll give you a thumbs up when you're done. All right, so if you could just, when you get a thumbs up, that's when you wrap up. So if anyone, to speak specifically about this map, whether you like it or don't like it, but all you have to do is line up right here and just, if you could just speak here, and 2 minutes, and I'll give you a thumbs up when your time is up.
So not about changing, it's just about this map.
Well, just about this map, what you like about it, don't like. Basically, Jamie, is that what you would like? Just feedback on this map.
Yeah, I think feedback on this map. We could also explore changes as a group, probably small changes, and then when we talk about the other maps, then you know, if a change, for example, would be, I think that it should be, the coastline should be in 4 districts, and can we explore that? Then that would be something to save for the strata map. But yeah, if there were more granular changes that could be looked at, then that would be a good time for this map.
Great.
Community of interest map?
Great. And when you speak, just state your name and then you can begin.
Hi, Jane Marshall. I live in the Rancho Guajomie area, kind of by Peacock. Boy, this is loud. My concern is the Guajomie Park area. I live like on the yellow side of Guajomie Park, and we really feel that, I live in this area right here. We really feel like this is part of all of us. I mean, really, like, and I hate to say, oh, on this side of 76 versus that side of 76. So I just want to make that comment that these neighborhoods all are doing the same activities together, and that kind of separates us from looking at it this way. Thank you.
Actually, I won't need that. Scott Ashton, CEO of the Oceanside Chamber of Commerce. You know, my only concern with this, I do like that it divides the coast into 2 districts, but my only concern with this is the blue area, I think is very light on business, and that's been our concern overall, is that the business community is equally balanced. I think the first neighborhoods map. Oh, thank you. I think the first neighborhoods map really accomplishes a little bit better what we're looking at as a chamber. So, thank you. Just to... Whoa.
I didn't know I was that much shorter than him. My name is Ray Ream. I am a resident of the area below Heaney Hills in the El Camino Country Club, right there. And I've actually lived in pretty much every single part of Oceanside, so I've got a good grasp of the different communities. I went to Libby Lake and South Oceanside, lived in Rancho del Oro and in the Deep Valley. And I know there might be different economic things that people are thinking about, but as far as communities go, I think that this map really, really preserves a lot of that, and that's what is very important about this. So that's all I want to mention.
Yeah, just speaking with Scott from the Chamber of Commerce. One of the reasons that the blue line initially looked very zigzaggy before we said to have the river be the boundary line is because that zigzag line was actually Mission Avenue. And for those of you that have driven down Mission Avenue, you know that it goes up and down. One way that we can actually help with as far as the business side is if we kept that line on Mission Avenue, you would get all the businesses down Frazee Road along with the Walmart, the new Target going up, and all that retail, all those retail locations down Mission Avenue, everything that is north of Mission Avenue. So maybe that's one way that we can create a solution to that issue as far as making sure that the blue has more representation as far as commerce and business. But
I'm going to explore that right now.
Okay. Absolutely. But everything else seems good as far as keeping all the other neighborhoods intact.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Why don't we just pause for a second and let her, you'll speak right after, but let's let Jamie just kind of see what that looks like. See what that looks like right now.
So this red highlighted area has about 7,500 people in it, and that change would make the population of the blue district 17.86% and the yellow district negative 18.5%, which means that the yellow district would have to pick up population.
Yeah, well, take out Wahomie, the ranch, go this, the Jeffrey's Ranch, take that out.
Real quick, so since we're at a point of maybe wanting to decide what to do, should we take a vote on what to do, Jamie, as far as?
I'm happy to, okay, I'm gonna get rid of this and see how much population is in this district to see if it would make a change, like if it would be an equal, I guess, exchange as far as population goes, to see if that would be a possibility that would make sense.
As you're doing that, Jamie, just, I think that's Jeffrey's Ranch, just to let you know, and that's a community of interest, just as you have on your radar.
Right, yes, which, so also this move would be splitting Jeffrey's Ranch from Morrow Hills, which was, right, one of the communities of interest. And that is only about 3,500, and I think that the balance would not be, it's not an equal enough population in those two areas to make the exchange, make the districts balance to the plus or minus 5% deviation.
So therefore, should we continue with the public comment as the map as it was constructed a few moments ago? Yeah. Okay, so Cindy, go for it.
I'm just going to do this so that it's on the record as far as having testimony. Again, the main disagreement that I would have, or the main change, would be the splitting of the coastal area at Wisconsin. If Crown Heights and East Side are community, they need to be together as a community of interest, then eliminating that was just a large voting block right in here. Whoops. Is that Grant? I think, where's Wisconsin? I can't, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on. So Wisconsin, so instead of if Crown Heights needs to be with East Side, then to just modify that out, but to include Loma Alta and such. I mean, I do have an alternative map, but as far as feedback on this map, I do feel it's really important to divide up that coast based on population density. So that would be the major issue I have with this map.
So the area that is highlighted right now is between Oceanside and Wisconsin, and then this is moving up Garfield, Minnesota, and Vine Street, and moving this area into the Green District would make the population of the Green District 9.56% over deviation, and of the Red District negative 9% deviation. So we'd be looking for about 4,000 or so people to move out of this Green District and eventually into the Red District.
Right. Do I wait to give you those other coordinates of that other alternative map? Jamie? Remember that other?
For the neighborhoods map, or?
No, it's for a different map, so should I wait on giving the population that we did?
Okay, yes, please.
Okay, I will wait on that then, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jerome Tooley, and this is my favorite map so far. I've been to 3 of these meetings, and the reason I like it is we live in this area, which I'm pointing the wrong way, right around here, which is, I guess it's called North Valley, but it's the River Ranch, River Point area that's separated. It's like, I like it because the river separates it. And this community here is pretty much a community of interest I'd like to maintain with Rancho de Oro. And also, I like this map because it's very compact. So like a representative, the strata map, someone said earlier today, the strata map, someone would have to like, their district would be from the harbor all the way to Fallbrook, right? That's a heck of a long distance, and every district would be like that. So I like that. And lastly, I just want to say that it hasn't been mentioned, but Oceanside's a pretty great community, and our elected officials are pretty great. We're forced upon to do this, and Oceanside chose to have this type of participation from us. So the city of Vista, basically, the city council members probably had a closed-door meeting, and they probably said, well, one city council member lived on this side of the street, and the other one lived on that street, well, let's split it right down the street so we can both run next time. So I just want to give props to Zach, city clerk, also the city of Oceanside, and the demographer.
Thanks, Zach. Earlier, I spoke in favor of a proposal that Richard Fox presented at the last meeting and the meeting before that. But as we all know, there's give and take. We have our business interests, and we have our communities of interest. And I think overall, when you look at what's being proposed here by Jamie, I think it's fair and it's balanced. Do I like it completely? No, but once again, I think it's fair and I think it's balanced. My main concern, like I said, I lived in the city for 65 years. 65 years. I've seen a lot of changes along with Richard and others, and Esther and others. And we have we have a lot of challenges, particularly in the East Side, Capistrano area, Town Heights, Mid Valley, and North Valley. And what I see here, with the possible representation, it could really address some ongoing needs. Overall, the city's a great city. The business community citywide will not be neglected by your newly elected 4 district representatives. Sales tax is sales tax. It all goes to the general fund. No district is going to have more money than the other district. Thank you. How can you be so sure? This lady asked me, how can I be so sure of that? My name is Terry Johnson. I served on the city council for 12 years. I served as mayor for 4 years. Yes. I did a lot before I came on the city council. We're still doing a lot today. We have great staff, we have great elected officials that really care for this city, and no district is going to get more than the other district.
Hi, my name is Richard Fox. I'm sorry I'm late. I had to run my South Oceanside community meeting tonight, but I have been to all of these meetings except the first part of this one, and I will be at the one next week. But Scott Ashton has always talked about keeping this together, and this kind of doesn't keep the businesses together the way he'd like to see it. I know that. And Terry, I guess, had my map up here this morning, or earlier today, not this morning, seemed like this morning, that had 3 that went to the ocean. And this is a very good map. I think I would accept it as a second to what mine was. There's mine. Okay? So it puts 3 legs all the way to the ocean, so you have representation from 3 different council people on the coast instead of 1 or 2 or whatever. And this keeps the business community together in the east. And I'd really like this to be one of the proposals that are looked at. If we can work on it tonight, that'd be great.
There was one other thing to give testimony. I just want to make it formal. One of the individuals had said that this was a great map and that it's great because it's connected. And the only exception is this. That's a great disconnect between east and west. Along the coast, everyone said, what do we have in common with down here? So that kind of,
It just happens to be the end of Oceanside.
right, and it's just convenient, but it's also a strata going across with two extremes, yes. So the communities of interest, right, but I'm going to present or give you information on trying to do it where there's actually more of a block going in. I guess I'll do that later, since we're just commenting on this map. Thanks.
Any other comments pertaining to this particular map?